Hey everybody, how are you today? So today we continue to talk about Chapter 13, Section 1, The Rise of Dictators. And today we're going to be talking about Italy and looking at what happens to them after World War I and how the events in that country will lead it into World War II. So we start off with the man that you see in the picture there is Benito Mussolini. And there's a great video clip that I've got posted from YouTube that you can watch. It kind of talks about his early life. It talks about how, he's a middle-class family. They're a very proud Italian family of their heritage and who they are, but they don't have a lot of money. And he actually had some discipline issues. He got kicked out of boarding school. He tried to be a teacher. He was a newspaper editor, and he gained some critical acclaim. And he was a member early on of the Socialist Party. So he had these lofty ideals that everyone in society could be equal and should have the same amount of wealth. This was kind of in response to earlier problems that Italy had had, where there was a lot of violence. There was a rise in a group of anarchists, people who believed there should be no government whatsoever. There had been attacks on the emperor's life, because it's still a monarchy in Italy at this point. They had some elected officials, so it's more of a constitutional monarchy like you have in England. But yeah, there was a lot of issues going on, and their economy had struggled for years. Italy had just never really come into its own. Remember they were a country that had been controlled by France and by Austria for many, many years, and they never even became one united group until the late 1800s. And then from that point on, they had struggled to industrialize. They were still agricultural based, and there was a lot of political conflict, and they just had all these struggles. Well, Benito Mussolini serves in World War I, and in World War I, it's actually how he's going to split with the Socialist Party. Socialists did not believe in the war. They thought that World War I was just a tool for the rich. It was a way for capitalists who owned gun factories and boot factories to make more money. And he said that, it was their civic duty to do their part, to support their country, to, if you have love, if you have pride for your country and for who you are, and if you respect your leaders, you need to serve, especially, when your friends are dying around you. And so, he serves. He splits from the Socialist Party. He becomes, quite successful in World War I, realizes that, he enjoys being in the military. He enjoys the fame, the acclaim that it brings, the sense of unity with other soldiers to kind of help and support him. And he really kind of gains this crew of fellows who he believes in him and supports him. After World War I, he is going to help create the fascist political party. And when you are a fascist, you believe that the needs of the country are more important than your own needs. Mussolini is a fascist, and he simply just calls, his political party fascism. But in truth, Adolf Hitler, who we're going to talk more about later coming up, is a fascist in a sense because he believes the needs of the Germans should be put above their own needs. He just calls their party the Nazi Party. And there's a few differences, but not a ton, to be quite honest. Spain is also, in a sense, going to become a fascist party, all kind of inspired because of Mussolini. This is very different compared to in Russia. Joseph Stalin is a communist that's a member of the Communist Party. So it's the exact opposite. Communism is all about sharing things. You're working together, but you're sharing things. It's supposed to be a society where everyone's equal, but in reality, they're not at all because Stalin is leading and controlling things. But in Mussolini's country and, in the Nazi Party, it's supposed to be the idea that there is one state. You acknowledge from the very beginning that the government is in control and has all power over you. And you're okay with that because they're doing what's best. And you're still focused on a capitalist society where you are potentially going to get rich. He is going to become over time known as Il Duce, or the leader. People love him, people trust him, people respect him. And so he will become our dictator here rather than Emperor Victor Emmanuel III. He will technically still be the monarch, but he'll have no real power. It's going to be very similar to what we talked about with Japan last time, where you've got Hideki Tojo, who is now the dictator, who has all power, and Emperor Hirohito is basically just a puppet, just a figurehead going along with things. And so after World War II is over, people will put very little blame on Hirohito or on Victor Emmanuel III, because they really didn't have any choices here or any power over what's going to happen next. They simply had to go with the flow. Otherwise, they worried for their families' safety. So after World War One, as Benito Mussolini, creates this fascist political party, the political tension in Italy just kind of gets worse than ever before, because a lot of people are very angry that Italy did not get more land, more money, more power out of the Treaty of Versailles. They thought that they deserved more. Remember, Italy was actually a member of the Triple Alliance, so that's Germany, Italy, Austria, Hungary, very early on. They chose not to honor that alliance, to be neutral, and then they switched sides and they joined the Allied powers. So a lot of people felt like, they never had to fight on the good guy side, but they did what was right. They fought, they created potential enemies by doing this, but they did what was right, so they felt like they should have been compensated. Now, Vittorio Orlando was included, in the talks at the Paris Peace Conference because they were a good guy on the Allied side, and he was considered one of the big four in terms of the countries that constantly met and discussed and made the peace treaty, and that would be France and Britain and the U.S. and Italy. But for the most part, Orlando felt like he was pretty much ignored. It was all really about this fighting back and forth between France and Britain and, the US. And mostly France really got its way. But a lot of people still say, well, it's because France had, all these casualties and faced all this destruction, and the war was really fought on their turf. And Italy was still kind of a minor player, but they were very angry about World War I. They felt like they should have gotten a lot more land. The war cost more than they anticipated. People were depressed about the number of casualties. People, of course, were turning to liquor and to other, ways to deal with their problems. And so after World War I, the government feels like it's struggling more than ever because people are angry and they're bitter and they're hurt, they're resentful, they're suffering from shell shock, they're drinking. Italy didn't have any destruction really to the land itself, but it's more so just about, how do we go from here in terms of economic prosperity? How do we create more jobs? Germany wasn't coming through with those Allied war reparations, so where are they going to get the money to rebuild? And it didn't really seem like the Emperor, Victor Emmanuel III, really kind of had any great ideas to fix the country. Which is how we come back to Mussolini. So Mussolini, or Il Duce, as he's called, right? He kind of just grows in power after World War I. He creates this fascist political party. And of course, members of this fascist political party are going to be people who have similar values to him. And they're going to be, a lot of it will be supported by his military friends. He was a good soldier. He was easy to work with. He got the job done. He had a lot of friends. He had a lot of allies. People trusted him. And he is very persuasive. He's an excellent speaker. He's definitely your car salesman, politician, charmer, kind of going around kissing babies and hugging people. And so as he makes his speech, people listen to him, people believe in him. And what he is promising is he's basically saying, you need to put me in power. Victor Emmanuel III has no way to create a better country for us, to fix our economy, to get us back on track, to gain us more land, to show the world that they disrespected us and that we're truly a world power, that the Italian people are an amazing group. He says, listen to me and I'll be the next Julius Caesar. I promise to rebuild Italy, to recreate the Roman Empire. And if you don't know who Julius Caesar was, he's one of the greatest leaders of all time. And he took Rome from when it was a republic, a democracy, when people could, vote and participate in government, at least men could, and then ultimately becomes a dictator and eventually is assassinated in one of Shakespeare's most famous plays. But then Rome goes on to become an empire and lives on for hundreds of years, and Caesar goes on a huge expansion campaign to take over more land. Mussolini claims to do the same thing. And he says, I will create new jobs for us. We will start to produce more weaponry and machinery. We'll continue to industrialize. And, he says, we will attack other nations and we will steal land. All you need to do is listen to me. And he, of course, seems very convincing for the most part. Now, what you see in the bottom corner that's a picture of his march on Rome. Him and his friends, they're kind of an armed gang, so to speak. They're usually, many of them had served in World War I. They call themselves the Black Shirts because they all wear black shirts. It's kind of a makeshift uniform. It's not their true army uniform, though. They didn't want to appear as a military state, as if this was a coup d'etat or they were seizing power. They want to make it seem like they're a group of friendly guys. They're a group of local Italians who love and support you. They're doing what's best for your mom and your family, and they're going to create new jobs. And, this is all about political image. And he wants to come off as they're doing this for the people, they're working for the people. It's not the idea that you are submitting your will to some military authority. He doesn't want to give any more people, a chance to rebel or say anything against him. And he comes off as very kind. There's no outward, political oppression or tension early on. It's all about getting the people what they want. The people like him, they want to support him. So him and this black shirt army, though, they march on Rome because they hear that there's going to be a communist revolution and communists are going to be taking over. And this is right after World War I has ended. So remember, the communist revolution was just fought in Russia, right? They had this entire civil war and millions died. And so he would go around in these speeches and he would say things like, do you want that to happen here? Because if we become a communist country, Russia may come in and attack and they're going to take land, from the rich and they're going to give it to the poor and they're going to make you all equal. And communists, for the most part, tend to be a society where they're not a religious group of people. So they're going to say they won't let you, be Catholic anymore, which is the dominant religion in Italy. They may attack the Pope, who's head of the Catholic Church, who lives in the Vatican, very close to Rome. And so he makes these speeches saying, we'll have to fear for the Pope's life. And he's head of the Catholic Church. He's, God's right-hand man on the country, in the planet, I should say. And he says, fear for your children's lives. They'll take away religion. They'll take away your land. They'll take away your freedom. They'll make you all the same. They'll take away your individuality and believe everything. So him and his men march to Rome, they claim, to help everyone. And so here's some pictures. Check out this uniform. It's just basically a pair of khaki pants, a long black shirt of some sort, and it doesn't look like they really have a design on there. So in the beginning, when he's taking recruits, most men own a pair of khaki brown tan pants of some sort and some kind of black shirt, and then he's draping himself to make it look even more distinguished with the flag. Once they get some more money for their organization and they get some more donations, you can see that it becomes a more standard uniform, and you can see kind of the picture of the black shirts. And it becomes, of course, over time, more of a true paramilitary group, not just an armed gang, one that's going to support him, provide him protection, help him create this totalitarian state over time where the people have no individual freedoms. So it'll come about, in time, but this is kind of his merry band of brothers he's going to use to take over the country. And the emperor, Victor Emmanuel III, kind of just steps back because he's fearful for his own life and the life of his family and of his children, so he just kind of lets them do their thing. And so why are people so willing to support this new political party? Fascism. Remember, there's a lot of isms this chapter, and we talked last time about totalitarianism, right? A society where you have a government in power that takes away all your rights. It has total control over all aspects of society. You have no free speech, no free press. Well, we will see eventually that Il Duce, Mussolini, does that as well. But in the beginning, just like with Hitler, just like with everybody else, people love Mussolini. And it's more so the case that they really love him than with Hideki Tojo. It's more like Hideki Tojo is a military leader who, is very successful in taking over Manchuria and gaining land for Japan. And people who are high up suggest that he becomes the new leader. And he basically steals power from the emperor and puts a knife to his throat and pretty much says, you let me have the power or I kill you. So it's more violent, and the people really realize that they can't fight back in Japan, and they kind of don't want to because they've bought into this propaganda that the country's putting out, that Tojo and the military are what's best for their nation. So it's similar in a way to fascism, but some people obviously were not happy about the fact that they had lost, all rights. But Tojo doesn't go on this whole propaganda campaign to try to convince people he's the best. When it comes to Mussolini, he does spend a significant amount of time trying to convince people that he is what's best for the country. And he says, here's my political party. It's fascism. And it is an extreme form of nationalism. He says, I expect you all to educate your children about our heritage and our culture, to teach that next generation so that they can be fantastic citizens and help create the next Rome. He says that you will have to listen to my rights and my rule, but in the beginning, he doesn't talk about limiting free speech or press. It is an extreme form of nationalism, though, because he does mention that he expects military service and that if they would be called to war to expand the empire, that he expects them to serve in the military and to provide sons for that army, which was a very common practice going back, centuries in Italian history, all the way back to the Romans. People like him, though, because, in this time period, the economy was struggling, and he appeals to the middle class especially. And he says, I'm going to protect your jobs. I'm going to create more jobs as we industrialize. I'll take out loans from other countries. We'll conquer other nations. We'll steal their land, their money, their power. So that really appeals to him. And he also tries to appeal to the older class and some of the middle class by talking about, old-fashioned values. Many other countries are giving women more rights, like the United States. They're going through a sexual revolution with flappers. Women are getting, the right to vote. Some women are choosing not to work, to get married. It's not going to become more commonplace, of course, till the 1960s, but still we see changes. In Italy, he's all about taking away all rights for women, going back to the idea that a woman should not own property, that she should be married, that she should, of course, not vote. Now, he says these things carefully. He'll kind of hint at them when he's around ladies and then outwardly say them around men. So he's kind of two-faced in that nature. And of course, he's a huge racist. He talks on and on about how the Italian people are a superior ethnic group, and their religion and their race is superior than Jews. And he talks all about how Jews should not have rights whatsoever, which is why Mussolini and Hitler will become such fast friends, because they both believe that Jews should be persecuted and subjugated and eventually annihilated. And so Mussolini will support genocide and will engage in it as well. Now, this, as I mentioned before, is the opposite of communism, because he's all about putting down this communist revolution. He doesn't believe in making everyone equal. He's really focusing on the life of the middle class and trying to help these. So this is really appealing to people, and they love and support him. Even in the beginning, this is our last slide, even in the beginning of his reign, people really like this man. As the Great Depression hits, and of course, Italy is going to be hard hit like everybody else, he goes about creating jobs, during the Great Depression. He says, okay, it's a lot of public works jobs, just like in the United States, in terms of rebuilding roads and bridges. It's also factory work. It's about parks. But he gets Italians back to work. He also really puts a lot of money and effort and focus on education, trying to educate that next generation, partially because he wants to indoctrinate them with his own propaganda and views, and make them future members of his black shirt army, right, who have true allegiance to him and treat him as more like a god. And in 1935, we're going to see that he finally decides to truly attack, and he decides to attack just like Manchuria was attacked by China. Oh my gosh, I messed that up totally. Just like Japan was attacking Manchuria, he decides to attack Ethiopia. So he's pretty much inspired by Hideki Tojo, and he says, well, if Tojo can do it, he attacked China, right? Really, when he attacked Manchuria, and then Tojo goes on to attack China, and nothing happens to him. The League of Nations condemned him, but then Japan, all they did was leave the League of Nations. They broke the Kellogg-Briand Pact yet again. Nothing happened. And so he clearly is like, well, this is a policy of appeasement. People are afraid of power. So if I train my troops, if I get my soldiers ready, if we go on an attack, then no one's going to stop us. And so he sets his sights on Ethiopia, which you can see in the map there. That's in the Horn of Africa, which juts out from the continent. He purposely wants to attack Ethiopia because Italy had tried to attack Ethiopia right before World War I began, and the Ethiopians under Menelik II had modernized and industrialized, and they had the Maxim machine gun, and they were able to fight back. When World War I began, they were one of like 2 or 3 countries which still had not been conquered by a European. But it made the Italians look weak to the rest of the world. So he wants to right that wrong from 20 years ago. So he goes in and he attacks. And of course, Haile Selassie, who is the leader of Ethiopia, their soldiers are willing to fight to the death. And they do have some guns, but they're still not as well trained as the Ethiopians. Now, to be perfectly honest, they probably really would have struggled more, but he's already good buddies at this point with Hitler. And so he calls in Hitler and he calls in the German troops, and they actually help him to annihilate the Ethiopians. And it's pretty brutal, very violent. And now Italy is increasing the size of its empire. And of course, once they conquer these people, basically enslave them, steal their resources, it brings them more riches, it helps them to repay some of their debts, and it puts them onto the road to power. It also really kind of cements the relationship between Hitler and Mussolini. So by 1936, they go on to create the Rome-Berlin Axis, which basically talks about how they will support each other, they will never fight each other, they both have the same fascist beliefs, they hate communists, and they will be, best buddies to the end. They have a real bromance going on here. And the League of Nations does nothing to stop them. Britain and France, the US do nothing to stop them, and they're on the path to war. And of course, they will be the two Axis powers in World War II as they officially create the German Pact of Steel in 1939. Well, that wraps us up for Mussolini for now. So you're going to want to keep working on your Dueling Despots assignment as well, where you try to figure out which emperor, which dictator, I should say, is the most evil. Have a great day, guys. Later.